Okay, we are officially live. Let's give it like 10 seconds. Let me check on my phone or like another tab to see if the live is actually working. Okay, I think we're actually live right now. Let's give folks, say, 2 or 3 minutes to settle in, and we can start with the presentation today. So, welcome everyone to another casual AMA with Cohort 20 alumni. We are the flagship program of Co-Create, which is a collaborative effort between Design Buddies and UX Go to provide you a 10-week intensive advanced design internship experience with a VC-backed startup in the heart of Silicon Valley. So I have Sebastian here again from last week and Keiko, which is a member of a different team. So today we will talk about navigating feedback and pivots when you work in a startup environments as a designer. And these are meant to be very like personal experiences, and not every pivots or every changes will look the same for every single one or every single team. So do take it with a grain of salt. But take some notes because I believe that this is one of like the skills that rarely anyone will teach you how to navigate when you work in a real design internship. So yeah. Okay, let me keep navigating through the slide. In case anyone cannot make it to the live session and have to leave at any point, we do have live recordings archived on YouTube of Design Buddies. So yeah, use that as your resource, and hopefully you learn something from it. Let me go to the next slide. So our agenda for today is we're gonna have a mini icebreaker in the chat. If we do happen to have like an extrovert audience, then we will like definitely communicate in the chat a lot. And then we're gonna introduce ourselves as the host of the AMA today. And then I'll interview a set of questions with our guest host, and then a Q&A if anyone have any extra questions that we haven't answered yet. Okay. I might have switched the order of the slides, so therefore I might have to skip one slide and come back.
Sounds good.
Okay, so homies, drop in the chat if you want to share. Okay, so your location and the craziest design project you have worked for and why so. We're gonna proceed to like introduce ourselves and also attempt to answer this question. So, hi, my name is Min, and I was a cohort 19 alumna. I work for Soulside AI during my cohort experience, which is an AI health startup based based in Mountain View. And basically, this is like a smart note taking scribe for mental health specialists to work with patient groups when it comes to mental health consultation and group therapy. So that was my experience, and I was part of cohort 19. And now, like, I'm doing alumni relation, and I'm loving my life in SF right now. So, Keiko, popcorn to Keiko.
All right. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Keiko. I was part of Team Blueberry, this most recent co-create cohort. Blueberry is a social media tool that seeks to turn social media comments into valuable conversations that you can have that is assisted by AI, um, like AI brand voice suggestion. That way you can address your comments at any time of day, regardless if you're sleeping or you're busy. So it helps create meaningful conversations at any time of day through the power of AI. So it was a really cool and crazy experience. Which feel free to ask me about how to handle a pivot because I just went through that. And I'll popcorn it over to Sebastian.
Hey, I'm back again. I am a design intern on the Ion design team, alumni cohort 20. And Ion specifically was a AI tool that helped entire non-technical teams edit and refine and ship changes in real time. It's mostly focused on doing design edits, but it's trying to really focus on not having to go directly to the engineer and letting like PMs and designers do edits on like code pages and live products.
Mm, interesting. Okay, so let's go back to the question I was asking the audience, and we can attempt to answer it ourselves. Um, what are like what is like some crazy design project that you have worked for? Like deemingly crazy. Let me think about mine. I would say I worked for this nonprofit AI lab based in New York City before, and we were trying to design an AI coach for like education, and end up um, the direction changed a lot. We changed the whole branding scheme, uh, and the features we were doing were did not really match what the like basically the whole team was not really on the same page. So we had to scratch the entire prototype and redo it, which took such a long time, and I was having school at that moment, so it was really stressful. But that was like one of the crazier experiences that I have, and we also have some team conflict at that time. So yeah, end up it was not a really smooth design process, but end up we still learn a lot about the corporate world and how to design. So anybody else?
Yeah, I can go next. I'm gonna say I am, but crazy in a good way, because it was essentially mixing an AI tool with a design tool, and then we shipped three different features. And the last one was an infinite canvas, which was really ambiguous for us to go through, and it kind of gave us like guidance into the future of like how like tools might look in the future who are for designers and people working in digital products, and it was just super interesting.
Mm. Yeah, I think for me, um, I've gone through quite a few, like a couple crazy projects. Namely, of course, Blueberry being one of them. But I think just to touch on something different, one of the one of I guess crazy and I'll like learn to pivot and adapt on your feet way was I had joined this internship that had switched in different cohorts of interns working on this one product, which is like an educational LMS based efficiency tool. But this tool really wasn't. So we had come in to work on and edit this design. But then once we started doing usability testing, we had asked questions like, "Would you use this?" And we were starting to get answers like, "No," and we were like, "Why?" So once we realized that this was a trend, we actually made the choice to go all the way back to research, informative research, in terms of interviews and survey, just so we could just get back on track for what users really wanted. So it was crazy in the sense that we kind of had to step back into square one a little bit. Um, and again, just think on your feet, figure out what you need to do, but crazy time to go through and reorganizing priorities.
Okay, that's a lot of context, but some of them will be repeated in the questions too. So let's move on to our questionnaire for today. Oh, actually, before that, our cohort 20 demo day, which is called Big Design Energy, is now live on Luma. We're going to be kicking off Tech Week. Okay. We're going to be kicking off Tech Week with our Big Design Energy conference. And this is going to be more like a short design demo slash networking day, very chill at Dovetail in SF. So if you want to come see the projects that our startup designers have been working on and navigating all the crazy feedbacks and pivots in order to deliver you a really solid case study, then come through and hang out with us at Dovetail for Design Demo Day on October 6th. It's going to be a really fun, cozy event. And yeah, go ahead and like RSVP on our Luma link. Okay, so this is like a pre-context. People who should tune into this talk, if you're curious about designing for the startup world, like how Kiko and Sebastian does, and you want to capitalize on pivots, changes, the craze of startups design, and create use that to assist your storytelling about your work experience, then yeah, you should come through to today. So then, question one, this is more like an icebreaker-y kind of question. Why did you guys choose design? Just give us a really short answer, I would say.
I can go first. So originally I started in computer engineering, but I was really obsessed with like figuring out how people use like products and things around them. So I ended up switching to new media design at RIT, and I essentially had to restart my degree and do a full 4 years again. And I was like halfway through my original major, and then along the way I minored in marketing and mobile web, and just fell in love with like UX UI interaction, prototyping, design systems, and 3D stuff. Um, I don't know, something about being able to do complex problems and figure out how users navigate through a certain product just speaks to me. And the field itself just lends myself, who's like a jack of all trades, to kind of use all my different skills. I still like to code and program here and there when I have to. Yeah, but just design just kind of fed into the things I love about like just technology in general.
So for me, I chose design because I always knew I wanted to work with people. I had come from undergrad doing psychology and anthropology, so I enjoy working with people and collaborating. But I discovered myself that customer service, like front end customer service, perhaps wasn't my exact calling. And then I recalled a time where I really enjoyed creativity and arts, and I thought, hey, UX design is something I've heard about before that I can revisit. So I just dove into doing some like online boot camps to start and realized, yep, this is where I want to be. So fast forward a couple years later, I've gone through a couple startups, and it's been a really fun experience because I get to be able to be creative and make an impact on people in a positive way. So that's really cool.
Awesome. Thank you for you guys' answer. Okay. Oh my God, so loud. So question two is that what startups did you guys work for?
Okay. For me, that's basically been the bulk of my experience. I started out in a startup that kind of serves like a more extensive Angie's list of like home improvement projects connecting and project management. Then I did one that was based around education and LMS, which I mentioned in a previous answer. Um, then I did that that I've done a couple of other internships, but namely, I believe the one I worked with for this one is one of the bigger ones I've worked with for Blueberry that I did with Co-Create. So but all of them were basically involved in the 0 to 1 process. So I've been with like B2B, SaaS, a little bit of here and there. So it's kind of been a little all the board, but really fun.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff I ended up working in, like through work experience and internships, have been either open source stuff or not for profits. But specifically, like startups, I technically I created a game studio with my capstone team at the end of college, and that's how we released our capstone, through that game studio. And we worked on it throughout the summer after our senior year, just to do fine tuning changes on it. And then I had worked on Revere, Indian fashion resale e-commerce website. I also did Ion, and then currently, right now, I'm working for this pre-seed startup called Canopy, which they specifically work on industries that are compliance and certification heavy, like medical industries, and managing that for companies. And that's kind of the summary of my experience with startups. I'm really focused on small teams, kind of what I like doing a lot.
I see. Okay, cool. Wow, I didn't know you were working for like another startup now. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Um, I see. Okay, so when you work for startups, how did your design process look like? Kind of like walk us through a little bit. Give us some context. Yeah.
I guess I can start with this one. So the first thing I need to do is gather information. Like I have to find out what research does the company currently have, if they've done any, and if they for whatever gaps or if they haven't, what do I need to do to fill in that gap? So doing research is always going to come first, just because I need to connect to my user first and foremost. Um, and that extends throughout the whole process, and it's very iterative. Like in a startup, you're likely going to be going through steps, going back and forth. It's not a linear process. It's a crazy all over the board map. You are going to be doing ideation, of course, but then you might do, for example, AI prototyping if you wanted to test out design. Then you might go into Figma and then make your design. Then you'll go user test it, and then you'll find, wait, something's up with that. Then go back to figure out what needs to be improved. So it's a big circle, line, shape, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, you have to respect the time as well, though, because time is one of the big three constraints of project management. And being able to iterate really fast in the time constraint, which is not likely going to be long, you do what you can. But just get stuff wrong fast. That's it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give a little bit of a similar answer, and it's gonna be focused kind of on realizing that you have time constraints. But just going into really, especially a startup with time constraints, you might not always have time for a lot of research, but I at least need to go in and understand like the product vision, what the MVP is, and like what the what the space is right now, right? Uh, Kind of just do like competitor analysis, stuff like that. Obviously, it'll change based on time and like what I'm specifically working on, how much research I do. But once I have an understanding and kind of an idea of like where we're heading towards the MEP, whether that's for the whole product, features, or stuff like that, kind of sit down with the team and start like iterating pretty quickly. Like a lot of times, like even skipping through like low fives and going straight into mid fives slash high fives. Lately, I've been going through like prompting tools and trying to create quick functional prototypes, especially for stuff like Ion or Canopy stuff. Like they're not UI heavy things. The interactions are kind of what the focus is, and it's a bit hard to do static screens. So even though like the UI isn't fully fledged out, but you have a strong idea of what the UX might look like, and that's kind of what you want to test out. Throwing it into a prompting tool or something like even like Ion and getting those functional prototypes are really useful to iterate back and forth, get feedback. Well, the engineering team's building out concrete features to you and the founders and people you're testing it with, and that just makes everything a lot faster, especially with just the way tools are. And then just go through that cycle of iterating and feedback really, and just realizing that what is the goal of the MVP, right? Like a lot of times, if you don't stay intentional and focused, you can kind of meander out of like your direct path, and your time is limited. So even though you have a lot of ideas, you want to make sure you accomplish what you set out to do. And you can always leave those features, those extra features, on the back burner for like future iterations or future versions.
And these are like more like most all of them are like team experiences for you guys, or some are like a mix of solo and then teams.
I would say a mix.
Mm.
Like my most of my experience of being on teams, except for Rivera and
Mm.
Canopy, those I was on Rivera was the only designer in Canopy. I'm the only designer. And I think with those, you feel a little bit more of the weight on you, and which I like because I also love to flex my different skills. So you do end up doing other things like branding and marketing or like a little bit of PM work. But I would say it's a bit of a mixture, and it's definitely a little bit different once you're in a team. I think you kind of have a bit more of a set role in a team, right? Obviously, with startups, you always have that flexibility of like going around and doing different things. But when you're like the sole person, it's kind of when anything's design related, right, or product related, you're always put in the loop.
Yeah, same for me. Largely been teams. In my current role, I have a lot more authority in terms of being able to propose ideas. So there is an essence of individuality that kind of lets me have that freedom. But generally speaking, it's teams, and in teams, you have to have conversations with a lot of consistency, especially during fast moving pivots at a fast pace. Because you have to really prioritize what is the number one priority you want to really solve first, and then don't be afraid to back burner what isn't. So it really comes down to like the number of people, and that just really means you have to have more conversations.
Got you. Okay. Now I think we're gonna step into like the flesh of everything. And um oh shoot, okay. That question four was a typo. But actual question four. Tell us more the pivoted moment in your design project. You can share your screen to show us like how that whole design process starting out, and then there's some changes and how your team kind of navigate through them together.
Okay. Um, I can start with showing my screen then.
Okay, yeah, sure. I can, yeah. Do you know how to do it?
Yes, I have. There's a present button right there.
Okay, okay.
So share screen. So I guess the context that I first want to set is that um we were originally given a PRD for a product, and that we thought it was going to be, and I'll show a bit of what
Yeah.
show a
What
bit
is
of
a
it.
PRD?
Oh, the give me a sec here. I'm just waiting for something to load real fast.
Yeah, yeah. The screen sharing, by the way.
Oh, okay, cool. Oops. Yeah, I forgot the exact acronym, but my bad. But
Mm.
but the PRD is basically like the requirements that the product is outlining, that you want to build. Um, and in this case, we were originally tasked with a Slack integration. I'm gonna turn the volume down actually, because like it's just gonna be like for the sake of presentation purposes. But as I said before, this is a social media tool. Um, that allows someone to respond to comments, and that did remain true from the start of it. So if someone is creating a post, it'll show up originally, we were told, on Slack, and you could do stuff with it on Slack. So you'd go on Slack and you'd see it pop up, and you would be able to take action from that integration. However, it was more focused on being able to see the response, like in terms of action. Obviously, at the time it was an idea of social listening, the idea that you would listen to conversations online, see what your spot is, and you could make choices from there. Um, however, per the question, um, we our biggest pivot came from the fact that it no longer became a Slack integration; it became desktop oriented, and our ICP, our target audience, more or less, became mid-sized e-commerce businesses. So we were designing for a different screen size, basically going to desktop, and a different audience, which was larger instead of just startups. So what we came up with was a full-on desktop. workflow. So you could connect your socials to this, and you could actually see now it's still social media oriented, but we wanted to make it fit with people's schemas of how they would respond to comments and what they would resonate with. We kind of settled on this blend of inbox elements, like because people understand what Gmail is, right? But this pivot was really difficult for us as a group, though, because we didn't expect the audience change and the focus change. Because suddenly I see a lot more action here, right? I see checkboxes, I can edit comments, right? So I think one thing is is the pivot at its core was suddenly you're not just listening, we want action. And that was really the important feature of this particular pivot. And I think that was a real challenge for us as a group. Because as a group, suddenly we're like, wait, this is midway through the cohort. We have to really change gears fast. Um, and of course, you're welcome to ask any more questions about that in the Q&A segment after this. But I'll finish. We overcame this challenge by aligning with our founder and aligning with our team and having extensive meetings to make sure we were on the same page, because especially doing this remote, without communication, you're a sunken ship. So communication was like the biggest key I could hammer in with this. And I'm sorry for going a little long on that. We have a story to tell with that, and that's really important for us. I want to pass over to Sebastian though now.
Yep. So I'm also gonna share my screen. Let's see if this. Yeah, this is the right one. Okay, so my pivot's a little bit interesting because there's two sides of it. There was, um, as we were, going through the, working with Ion and stuff like that. We shipped three different features, right? Properties panels, layers panel, and then the infinite canvas. And as we were going through and figuring out those features, like properties and layers panel were a little bit more straightforward, but we had started like even from those first initial features, we had been like sprinkling in like things about the infinite canvas, right? Kind of something like what Figma has, but retrofitted around like an AI prompting tool. And along the way, they were also realizing that the entry point to their product Ion was difficult because it was hard to get people to have another tool within their tool stack that wasn't directly linked to anything. And for us, it was we hadn't even started the infinite canvas yet, but we were struggling to figure out how do we tie like the initial product to this like third feature versus like this whole other layer to it, right? And our insights kind of start driving their pivot that they did, and we kind of informed it. And you can I'll show later, but you can kind of see that some of our screens and stuff of the stuff we did kind of informed what they shipped out while we were designing stuff, and you can kind of see like, oh, like this is coming from the same place. But so like originally Ion would just this screen with like the basic chat UI, and then you had like a standard properties panel, and then with us, they as we were talking and going through F1, F2, and F3, they like I said, they were trying to figure out how do we change the entry point to it, and Slack's something to use for all teams essentially, right? So we had come up with like an idea of like live cursor edits and audio edits, right? That we hadn't completely delved into, and like node based canvases, like you see in 3D programs. So they kind of, as we were designing out all the other features and going into Infinite Canvas, they pivoted their entry point to the actual product itself. So they kind of marketed, oh, this is Ruby, AI product designer assistant in Slack, and you can upload stuff, right? You can upload it like any other prompt tool, ask it questions, and it'll design screens for you, and then it'll have kind of this like basic infinite canvas right now, and you can prompt it in there, push it to the code base, etc. And then this is kind of our initial F1 and F2, just building out like the tool as a full design tool, right? So like this is like the second layer to their product now, right? Like now it's first users are introduced to their space through Ruby, and then they go into here and they have like the more standard design tool, right? There's later on there you'll see like we updated even more to incorporate the infinite canvas, which is what at like seeing from the outside it's like the infinite canvas ties Ruby and this part of the thing, but for us it was Ruby was tying infinite canvas and like the F1 F2. um, so this would be the infinite canvas. You can just kind of you can see it's similar in many ways to the Ruby canvas. You can edit page iterations, right, prompted through different ways. We have this AI toolbar where you can select, you can multi-select, and then you have the live cursor, which is this little cursor over here, and you can do audio edits, or you can prompt it inside the actual chat, or like on the screen itself, through like quick chats, like how you would do in Figma, like in FigJam, or like in the Figma design tool itself. And this would be like for the page level. And then this is kind of the updated thing, because we did have to like refine the UI a bit and merge it a bit to switch back and forth between the workspace and the canvas itself. And then this is like the last part of it is you have components and sections on pages, and this is really similar to like the initial page canvas mode where you can edit pages, but these are specific components. Here you can do variations, or states and stuff like that, and you can push it into the main page. And that's was our kind of like flow. So we were having like these features were being designed and like thought out by us, and our insights were kind of driving the Ion team to pivot into a different direction to introduce their project differently, because they were having issues with like getting people to actually go into the product and stuff. But once they're in it, they really enjoyed it. So that was kind of interesting. Is like our research and our insights kind of informed their pivot, right? So we were kind of driving their pivot, and it kind of worked out well for us, because it kind of ended up tying our vision for infinite canvas with their Ruby.
Perfect. Okay, so with that said, a question for you both is that when the pivot happens, did you guys have any say in that, or like how did you guys kind of process the change?
I think so for our group and for Team Blueberry, I believe it was kind of, I would say it was sudden for us in a way. We were told in a weekly founders check-in that there was a new team member there was another team member introduced, and we were introduced to this new logo. So we kind of just were like, "Wow, that's really cool." But we definitely afterwards had had a small short internal panic, going, "Wow, we did not see this coming." So there was definitely an element of surprise to it. So we took the evening to process it, think about it, and then the next day we met up and we're just kind of like, okay, what do we need to redo in accordance with this? And what that turned out to be was like revamping the how might we statement, which how might we represent the problem framed as a question. So what are you trying to solve? Just for context. And so that's one thing we revamped. We also revamped the user story, because the original store we had was with a smaller startup founder in mind, and now we were switching over to an e-commerce mid-size company more. So, when it's sudden, take a deep breath. You can do it, and then you just regroup. Just take a breath. Know that you will get through it. You will make something, and you figure out your next steps. So even if it is sudden, you can still do it.
Yeah, so for us, um, we didn't like they had told us that they were pivoting to the entry point, right? Before they officially did it. Um, we we didn't directly like have a say in it, but it was driven from our insights and our talks with the founders, right? So it wasn't we could see it coming, right? Because a lot of our stuff was figuring out like, oh, you have Ion and it knows it can't replace Figma. And it's not like replacing any of like these like massive like code editing prompting tools, right? It's not made for code editing. It's made for design changing to live products. So like a lot of our research was kind of revolved around figuring out where it fits into a tool stack, and a workflow for a designer. And we that was a lot of stuff that we were asking questions in interviews and stuff and trying to figure out. And a lot of our affinity mapping, like there's stuff about that and figuring out how we tie this in, right? Because we wanted to have people, once they're in the tool and they don't have to necessarily go back to Figma to like do stuff. We wanted to limit the context switching and have Ion kind of fit perfectly into the flow itself. So we didn't necessarily know until they started doing it. But their idea with like Ruby kind of came from our initial like ideas about like this live cursor editing and like having a chat there they with someone you can chat back and forth with. That's a person, right? That one of our team members, Flo, was working on. And they really liked that idea, and they liked some of the node based stuff that we had initially sketched while we were working on F1 and doing quick ideations for F3. So we didn't necessarily know, but we weren't surprised. And just with the circumstancing and the context of it, it worked well for us because their pivot was kind of informed by us. So in a way, it was helping tie in eventually when we worked on Infinite Canvas back into the main workspace. So I think initially, at least for me and some of us, we gasped a little bit because we didn't. They said they weren't changing the product itself. It was just how people got to it initially. But we didn't quite know what that meant. And then the day they released the demo, we had seen it like the day before, and it was really cool. And I actually ended up using it to like prompt and prototype some like brainstorming stuff for F3, and I think it ended up informing us pretty well on like the direction we wanted F3 to go to, and it helped us with a struggle we had, which is how do we tie the infinite canvas, right? Because it's not the infinite canvas isn't like Figma where you can have all these pages that you can design and stuff like that. It's still kind of focused on just like prompting and page iterations of the same page. But that kind of helped us tie in everything together, and it also kind of helped us with like, oh, where does this fit, right? So now it has a link to Slack, and Slack could be that initial entry point. So I think in the long run, it all just meshed well together. Maybe we just got lucky, but it was kind of driven by our insights. So that that has to how we handle it. We gasped a little bit, but like we like looked at it like the big picture and like what they want to do as a product, and it all made sense, right? Because it was kind of informed partly by us.
I would say with Team Blueberry, we also did have a say in how the pivot went after that because despite the fact that we did, in fact, like it was dropped on us, and we had to figure out our next steps from that. It's worth noting that because we were building it 0 to 1, they were actually counting on our insights a lot of the time to drive the overall direction and the thought process. So our ideas were taken in with stride at basically every step. So we worked in the new factors that were coming in as well as our ideas, and that's how we produced what we did at the end, is because we had that say.
Got you. Great answers. Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I have one more. Okay. Then I would say that's with like the changes. Now I kind of want to hear like more in detail how your team kind of like split up the works, and how did like you guys collectively feel about the fact that all of like your work that you designed before kind of being scratched a little bit, or you guys managed to find a way to also incorporate that into the new update?
Yeah, so for Ion, F1 and F2 were still important features because they wanted to have precise editing in there. So that stuff wasn't scratched. And we had just started the Infinite Canvas stuff. So we did a little bit different, right? We had, instead of like one long sprint, we had 3 different sprints. We divided our team up for F1 and F2, and we had teams of 3. And then when we went into F3, we kind of, it was a lot of ambiguous stuff. Like we didn't really know where this was going, so really it could go anywhere. Like there wasn't any specific direction. But like that, I think it kind of, I think some people were going to a certain direction at the beginning of F3. We were still early on, but with like the introduction of Ruby, it kind of set us towards a specific direction with Ruby. And then from there, we started creating like a journey map and like dividing up like what are the core features of the Infinite Canvas and how it connects to the Ruby and to the workspace. And how we divide it up is that, okay, so we have these core features, right? Or like these core group of features, and each group has like certain features, right? Like the AI toolbar, Infinite Canvas, the prompting within the chat itself, right? And we kind of be like, okay, so like everyone should work on a couple features from each of the different groups, and that's how we kind of divided, right? We, like I would say, divide and conquer the features, and then just made sure that everyone was aligned. And I think it helped with people working on features from different groups, because you always had people knowing what was going on with the other features, and that's kind of how we handle that.
Yeah, so so I guess just for context, firstly, in the cohort project, one thing we do early in is decide roles on what you want to explore and what you have skills in. So, for example, I took on the usability testing lead role pretty early in. So we had roles somewhat set going into the pivot section of our project. But what we really did is when we hit that pivot, um, we really honed in on something you could work on, and we divided tasks accordingly. Like there was like one person who was really leading each body section of our product. I was obviously helping with. I and another member of my group were doing a lot of testing and focusing on that. So we really honed in on our lanes and made sure to do. And we and I think one key thing that stood out in my experience is the words of the coach who was helping Team Blueberry out, which was when we're navigating this, get things wrong fast. Just make mistakes fast because you know you're going to get wrong at some point. So the way we chose to navigate this is have the usability testing team do a test, then the team who's working on the prototyping and design will refine it accordingly. We'll test, refine. You can see there's a circle here. Um, so our key for navigation was to hone in on your role, figure out what you can do best, figure out what we each do best, own that lane, and get things wrong fast. Because the faster you do that, the faster you will get to an answer that's closer to what your users would need. So that's how we navigated this with roles and how to work through changes.
Thank you guys for the answer. Okay, then the next question is I would say if you were to summarize that pivot, like the learning from just pivoting in general across the board of all the startups experience you guys have worked at, um, what are some like hard-earned lessons you guys have learned as designer or design team?
I would like to bring up a quote from one of my professors in grad school. Um, because I have a degree in HCI, my master's, and one of my professors at UCI was basically told us, don't be afraid to kill your darlings. Like you're going to move really fast and things will change. Like what you see one day will look different when you actually hit another version or the MVP if you're going 0 to 1. So don't get attached to a design. You might be create something and you might, and of course, defend, like if you have a justified reason for making the choices you did, say it. Obviously, in a startup, you're an individual and you probably have some modicum of authority on proposing an idea. So if you want to own it, voice that reason. But don't be afraid to kill your darlings because ultimately these are going to change. Those designs will change. So don't get too attached. So that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, I agree with the whole like don't get too attached to your ideas because like thing will change. And honestly, like before I learned about like how fast-paced startup can be and just yeah, ideas was like so just like scrap paper. I was like so attached to my work and I feel so disappointed when my work did not get chosen. So it was like a little piece of thought. Okay, any more lessons?
Yes. So for me, I'm gonna go with have guidance for your feedback, right? Especially when you're in a meeting with a founder or stuff like that. You can't just like present your iterations or whatever you presenting without like directing that founder or whoever you're presenting to towards what feedback you're looking for, right? Like, because let's say you design something and it was well designed and stuff, right? But you don't ask for feedback or you don't like guide them towards like what you're specifically looking for. Like depending on what it is, like sometimes you can be like straightforward and just be like, I need feedback on these specific things, right? Or if maybe they're going off on a tangent and stuff like that, try to like wrangle them back in to go back to the direction of the feedback you're looking for, because obviously the founder has one vision and you really are directing his current ideas towards his product vision, and you want to make sure that you're always getting feedback on the stuff you need. So I think always having guidance for the feedback. And then another one would be understanding the scope, um, especially when something's ambiguous. Obviously, we're all working on different features, but sometimes you can start expanding out. Don't expand out in scope when you have limited time, right? Be efficient with your time and make sure your core functionality is working first before you go into these additional features, right? Because then you have this direction, you have these constraints and stuff, and you go out of them, and then you could just unravel, and you're losing time you don't have, and aren't working on the actual core features that you're trying to ship out.
Okay. Um, that was really good answers. Moving on. Okay. So then do you guys during this period, what would you guys say was like the biggest support or resources that helps you guys navigate the adjusting and adapting to the changes much easier than you guys might have done it?
I think that so for Team Blueberry, it was having our coach as a mentor figure during the 10-week period because Kathy had so much wisdom on how to like or maybe not the wisdom per se, but just being able to look at it from overhead and be like, okay, what do you guys need to do? What can you reuse? What can you repurpose? And
Mhm.
kind of just helped us guide that discussion so we didn't get to the point where we felt super overwhelmed that we couldn't take action. Like taking
Mm,
action is vital through this. Like just don't sit still. Like create something, make a prototype, revamp your how might we. Just figure out what you can do to take action and having someone like Kathy for us who basically helped push us into action. Like we were going to do it too, but having someone to really push that for you had a lot that was really helpful for us as a group.
mm, I see. How about you, Sebastian?
I'm gonna say the coach too, especially Johnny, with us. especially when we got into the later features like the infinite canvas and stuff like that.
Mm.
A lot of us were like felt daunted because it was ambiguous and stuff. And with the first two ones, there was a bit more direction. There was stuff we can reference back to, like there's layers panels and there's properties panels. Like we weren't reinventing the wheel at all. We were trying to retrofit it for what Ion was and just making it better for what the purpose was needed for Ion. With Infinite Canvas, obviously, like Figma has an Infinite Canvas and other design tools like PenPot, but not in the way we were imagining it. And he really helped us with like focus from an outside perspective and clarity, because a lot of times we're kind of going off the rails trying to come up with all these features and ideas and going out of scope because they're like, what is the scope, like what is and what isn't the scope. There wasn't like a clear set thing, and he was kind of, because like he was coaching us and we were the ones designing and like in the weeds. So from an outside perspective, he's like, okay, like these features just don't make sense together or stuff like that. Like it's the focus doesn't seem like tailored, right? Like it seems like everyone's focusing on like different directions. So I think it was really important for us to kind of have him from the outside in come in and be like, oh, like for him, like, oh, like this doesn't make sense. Like it seems like your guys are doing completely different things. And I think hearing that kind of like put stuff into perspective, and like we were able to align better just having him there, giving us that feedback.
Got you. Honestly, from what I observed from from what both teams, I feel like Johnny and Kathy have really distinct style of coaching. I feel like Johnny is very, I would say, more calm, more like the slow talker, like more like the type who would rather listen to what you guys have to say first and then drive conclusions. And I feel like Kathy is very like, more like aggressive, really kind of proactive in approaching like problem solving.
Yeah,
So
that's accurate.
that's definitely like a really interesting, like contrary, but still both of them offer like the right kind of
Yeah.
guidance for you guys to navigate the changes. Yeah. Yeah. And then I think the last question before we end the session is that how are you guys incorporating all of these changes into your case study? Because ultimately, the reason why people are fear of navigating pivots and changes is because it's just hard to tell those things on like a product design case study. Um, and everything like seemingly, if it's smoother or like seems perfect, a perfect design process, and it's easier to write about. So how do you guys like come about incorporating that into your own like work display?
So for me, I so I'm gonna say it's coming from a perspective of what artifacts do you have on how you tell a story. Because in our case, our pivot came before we could really make a ton of designs pre-pivot. So in our case, we said we're not gonna focus on the pre-pivot stuff. We'll say it started like this, but here's the bulk of it, and here's what we worked with for like the remainder of our time. So I'm incorporating it into my case study with the resources and artifacts I have, which is largely focused post pivot. I think for us, and this is something that I'm continually workshopping and learning to do, because you have to think about what you did during the pivot. Like why you have to think about why did this pivot happen? What changed? Figure out, does it make sense? Like if I'm gonna say there was a pivot, what was the impact of that pivot? So part of the storytelling is really thinking about the concrete detail of, this is what happened, this is why it happened, and this is what we did. So like if you think of a really good story, it has tension. Where is that tension? Like being able to frame that tension and use your artifacts to support it. That's how I'm approaching the case study, as is us as a team, because we're currently making a slide deck for that.
Yeah, so for me, kind of going off what Min said, like, oh, like if there was no pivots and there's no like if there was no pivot, it's kind of easier to write a case study. But easy is not always better, right? I think it's better if you do have a pivot and you do have challenges, right? Like the market's hard, and a lot of companies and stuff, they're looking for you to have gone through real world challenges and have to have dealt with like things thrown at you unexpectedly, right? And maybe it's easy to write the straightforward case study, but then you go and you're like looking for feedback and stuff and trying to figure out how to improve it. It's hard to throw in fake challenges and fake pivots and fake problems and obstacles, right? And like Kilo said, like a good story has tension, right? So having these pivots there, those pivots happen for a reason, right? They didn't just come out of nowhere. Maybe initially they seem like they didn't come out of nowhere, but you need to step back and kind of figure out like, oh, like research insights, something you did as a team led to that pivot, right? Maybe not completely your design team itself, but there was parts of what you did led to that pivot in some way or another, and it's figuring out how you tie those things from what you initially started to the end. And I think having something like that really differentiates your case study. So for me, it's really just figuring out like, oh, where along the way did our insight starting lead Ion into this entry pivot, right? And I think that although like it might seem like it might derail the story structure in the case study, I think it makes it interesting because like the reader is reading and stuff, right? And like, oh, like you did research, you did this, yada yada yada. But then you get to the pivot and it's like, oh, okay, so like these insights and stuff, and then you explain what you did before and how that connected to that, and then how that led to the final outcome. And I think that's where you get like people really interested in what you're saying.
Very insightful answers. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Oh, Alex tuned in. Come on. Hi, Alex. You put a comment in the LinkedIn live. Yeah. So I guess that is the end of the session. We literally have 4 minutes left. And excited to see what you guys present at SF Tech Week and Big Design Energy, guys.
Yep.
So come on in and see us present. And yeah, all this learning gonna like culminate into a really fun hangout. And I honestly like, yeah, can't wait to meet you guys. So okay. So thank you everyone for tuning into the session. And hopefully you guys have taken away some really good lessons from today AMA Q&A. And yeah, approach everything in the design process with an open mind. And every part of the design process is actually part of it. So capitalize on it, tell a good story. So I think that's like the takeaway of the session today. So thank you everyone and have a good rest of your day.